You walk the gravel path through a historic Ontario village. The lantern in your hand flickers once, twice, and then the flame dies out, leaving only the dull wash of the moonlight to guide your way. The night is still, except for the soft crunch beneath your boots and the whisper of the wind through the trees. You get the feeling you're not alone. It's faint at first, but you get the prickling feeling that someone or something is watching you from one of the dark porches. You stop. The air feels different now. Somehow, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. Something is pressing closer, unseen but undeniable. Then you hear it.
And I'm like, okay, what just happened? And they looked back and they said, something just growled at us. And I said, what do you mean, like an animal? And they said, no, like it sounded human.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Today, I'm joined by Ali Crone, the heritage programmer of a mysterious village in Ontario. This is the Pickering Museum Village. Just outside modern Pickering is this living history museum that sits on land once shaped by early settlers in the 19th century. But before that, it was home to the Wyandot, Huron-Wendat, and later the Mississauga, Anishinaabe peoples. European settlement began in the early 1800s. The township was officially named in 1792 by Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe in honor of Pickering in Yorkshire, England. Some of the first settlers were Quakers who were drawn by the promise of fertile land and religious freedom. Between 1801 and 1807, Timothy Rogers, a prominent Quaker leader from Vermont, led dozens of families and established mills and farms in the area. Timothy Rogers was a respected Quaker who hoped to extend his vision far beyond his own homestead. He set the tone for how the township would grow, govern itself, and endure for generations. Rogers had envisioned a place of faith, order, and opportunity. He had scouted land grants in Upper Canada for Quaker families facing overcrowding and religious restrictions in Vermont and Pennsylvania, and guided them north across the border. Under his direction, settlers began the first grist mills and sawmills, laid out roads, and created the foundation of what would become Pickering Township by 1811. Pickering Museum Village itself isn't a single historic site, but a collection of buildings including homes and barns that were relocated and restored to reflect rural life from the 1800s. Families once cooked over open hearths, worked long days in the fields, and endured harsh winters with little more than determination and community. More than a century after Rogers first set foot in the area, the Pickering Museum Village preserves the pioneer spirit he left behind.
Initially, technically, it would have been, I think, 1959 would have been when the museum itself was started, but that was specifically a centennial celebration for the Brougham Schoolhouse, which was just one building. But as the years went on, people were collecting things and things that had significance to Pickering and to our local area. So the Museum Village reopened in 1979 and it's continued to grow from there. So houses have been added throughout the years, and we haven't had a new house in a while, but we definitely have revamped what we have and have added in exhibit elements and updates and things like that so that we can, you might not walk into one of our houses and, for example, see exactly how something might have been set up in, 1846. But you might walk in and see that there are interactive elements inside the house that relate back to a particular theme. So we're trying to keep it interesting, and so maintaining the historical importance of the houses, but adding in things that people want to learn about and tactile and things that are good for families and kids.
That's Ali Crone. She knows the village better than most.
This museum in particular, it's really nostalgic for me, but probably for a lot of people my age and even older who've grown up in this region. So in Durham region, people will say, "Oh, I think I've been there before," and I usually say, "Yeah, if you were in grade 3 within an hour radius, you probably came here for your early settler unit, because we are primarily an early settler village." And so, yeah, it was really nostalgic for me. I used to come to camp here as a kid. My mom would take me for visits. We used to do some theater here that I acted in high school. And so then when I saw a job come up, I thought, oh my gosh, like, wouldn't that be so fun to be back at the museum and get paid for it? So that's what happened.
She has spent years helping visitors connect to the past, and not just through guided programs across the 25 acres, which features 19 heritage structures, including homes, barns, workshops, and chapels, all carefully relocated from across the region. She oversees everything from family tours to the museum's popular ghost walks, the kind that just tell stories by invite, but invite you to experience them. That's because some believe that those who once lived in this village never truly left.
Yeah, we have a little bit of everything. So we've got our log barn, we've got our log house. So we kind of take people through what it would have been like to be an early settler. You may have, built your log house first while you continued clearing your allotted plot of land. We've got some more established houses that are from a later period date. We have a blacksmith shop. It's a unique blacksmith shop because it's quite large. It would have also doubled as a carriage building and carriage or wagon painting as well. So it's got a beautiful old forge that we're still able to use today. We have some professional blacksmiths that come in and whether they're working on like one of their own projects, just to kind of keep it lively, or leading a group as well. We have blacksmith workshops that we do. So that's really interesting, really fun. We've got the chapel, which is a Bible Christian chapel. We have Oddfellows Hall, which really is a church, but would have hosted meetings for the Order of Oddfellows as well. So lots of different. We've got the Brougham Temperance House, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I would argue that it's probably our most haunted, and that ran as an inn for part of its history. So yeah, lots of kind of different houses. They each have a bit of a different vibe to them, and I would say that when we're talking supernatural, everybody has a bit of a different house that they're saying like, okay, I'm not closing that one alone. Like, so everyone gets a little spooked by different things in each place.
During the day, the village feels peaceful. Visitors stroll between buildings. Interpreters in period dress demonstrate blacksmithing, cooking, and weaving. It's an educational experience, carefully researched, grounded in real history. But after dark, the atmosphere changes. And that's when we begin our tour and start near the edge of the property, where we'll find a large 2-winged home with sunny yellow siding and trimmed in green. It looks peaceful now, but for many, the Brougham Temperance House is considered to be very haunted. Built in 1840, it once served as a tavern and later a hotel, and was originally run by James and Elizabeth Woodruff, members of the temperance movement, which believed in abstaining from alcohol. But those who reside within the building are long past needing a drink.
I think it's probably the most haunted. So the Brougham Temperance House was built. It's sort of two separate structures. Originally, it was two separate structures. And it came from Brougham, thus the name Brougham Temperance House. So it was quite close by to our site initially. So the sections were built between 1835 to 1850, and they were joined together at some point. So at a certain point in time, there would have been a little like sort of breezeway between them. But it was restored, and it was, when we opened it post-restoration in 2010, it was sort of designed and restored to represent when it was run as a temperance house by James and Elizabeth Woodruff. So temperance meaning to abstain from drinking alcohol. So sometimes if I'm leading the ghost tour, I say that I think that's the scariest part. But it did, it wasn't in for part of it. So the private side, the Woodruff family would have stayed on the east wing. They would have had sort of their dining room. Sometimes we call it the tap room, but obviously that's not temperance appropriate. So for these purposes, we'll say the dining room. There would have been then the flop room upstairs, which is where people would have come almost hostel style. There would have been mattresses laid out, and there still are. That's how we have it set up now. Little straw mattresses on the floor, and you would have paid to stay there for the night. Would have been communal, and it would have probably been hot if it was summer. It would have been potentially not smelling very good, especially if you're thinking these are people who have been traveling for who knows how long, who knows when the last time they've bathed was. There would have been probably quite a bit of issues with lice and rodents and other bugs and whatnot that I'm sure a straw mattress was a perfect home for. Anyway, that house itself, we tend to get quite a bit of activity from, and I'll just give you some small examples starting out of just little things that kind of make you go, like that was weird. I know for myself personally, that is the Brougham Temperance House is where I have heard people calling out, and I've heard when I know that I'm alone in the house and no one else is in the near vicinity in the village, and I've heard people calling hello, to the point that I've responded and gone hello, and I've even gone out to the porch to look around thinking, oh, we're closed, but a visitor must have wandered in the gate and someone must be here and you're looking for that person, and there's never anyone there. I had a staff member who was alone in the building, and she came running out and said, "What do you guys want?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "Well, someone's calling my name." And I said, "No, it wasn't anyone here." So she said she was in the house and someone was absolutely calling her name.
Inside, there's a narrow staircase leading to the upstairs dormitory where travelers once slept shoulder to shoulder on straw mattresses. This is where you can find a rocking chair that the spirits of the home have requested be moved to a particular place.
There is a rocking chair that sits upstairs in the private side of the Brougham Temperance House where the family would have been. That would have been the family's bedroom. A guest several months before this happened, had said, I can connect with spirits, and they actually don't like the chair being in the corner. They would much rather it be by the window. And I mean, that's fine. So we moved it towards the window. So now the chair sits under the window. When I brought the mediums through, months later, different people, we went upstairs, and one of them looked at the rocking chair and she said, that used to be in the corner, didn't it? It's much better over here by the window. They like it much more.
There have been rumors that the chair has been found rocking gently, back and forth, back and forth. The air is still. The door had just opened. There was no breeze strong enough to move it. And yet, it continued. Skeptics might point to old wood settling, uneven floors, or the natural sounds of aging structures. And they wouldn't be wrong. These buildings are over a century old after all. But there's something about places like Pickering Museum Village. They aren't just collections of artifacts. They are collections of lives. On the first floor, we'll find the parlor, which feels closed in, as if the air hasn't moved for a century. And that's where we'll find one of the museum's most unsettling artifacts.
Call it the fainting couch. It's that kind of long style of couch with no arms. And people tend to get bad feelings and bad vibes around this particular piece of furniture. There's a little bit of folklore with this piece of furniture that nobody knows exactly where it came from. So all of our artifacts are donated with donation records, and then they're given an artifact number, and they're logged into our collection. And there is no record of this piece, so no one really knows its exact age or where it came from or who donated it. Anyway, this couch, it has lived in other houses before, and it currently is residing in the Brougham Temperance House. And people, like I said, they just tend to get sort of an eerie feeling, sometimes a bad feeling. I've had people touch the couch and say they felt dizzy or they felt sick. I've had people touch the couch and say that their arm felt cold. Now, what's interesting is that a few people have independently picked up different things about this couch. So what we had heard from a medium several years ago was that she sensed a male energy associated with this piece of furniture and suspected that perhaps he was some sort of doctor. And her feeling was that this couch was part of his office or his house, something that he was associated with, and that perhaps he had done unsavory things to patients with this couch or with this couch in the area.
Mediums have explored the museum countless of times, and they often sense a particular entity emanating from the couch.
We had a staff member's friend who also sensed a male energy, an angry male energy with this couch. And she described the man, and it was pretty similar. But then most recently, when I had the two mediums that I have connected with come through, the one medium's small son went to sit on the couch. And as soon as he went near it, the medium heard a voice say, "Kiss me." And she said, get away from the couch. And she too sensed a presence of an angry man. And she said, it's weird, that he would say, "Kiss me." And we said, well, this is what other people have said, that perhaps this was a doctor or some similar profession who had female patients who was, behaving inappropriately. And so it's just interesting how these separate instances line up with each other.
The Temperance House is one of many structures on site where staff and visitors over the years have reported unusual occurrences. Our next destination is a short walk from the Temperance House. It's a tall, red brick home known as the Redmond House. It was once the family residence of Susan and John Redmond, early settlers in Pickering Township. Inside, the scent of old wood mixes with candle wax and something quieter, the feeling that someone has never left.
The Redmond House, for example, we know that the wife did pass in that home, and it's actually the building I'm sitting in now. Sometimes we'll say good morning to her when we come in, or when we're locking up, we'll say goodbye. And definitely there are people who sense her presence in this house, definitely.
That's because these buildings hold collections of lives. Real people lived here, worked here, struggled here, loved and died here, and their echoes remain in what today is the museum's administration offices. Footsteps when no one else is inside, doors that slowly open despite still air, and most unsettling of all, staff working at their desks often have the sensation of being watched.
So sometimes part of the ghost tour that I like to do is a moment where we see if we can make any connections. And I have done this in different houses, and so when I've done it in the Redmond house, I specifically am trying to connect to Susan Redmond herself. And what I'll do is I'll take a pocket watch that's on a long chain, hold it still, and I'll say, if there a spirit here that wants to communicate with us, make the pocket watch swing, make it move for us. And so I personally ask it to swing forward and backward for yes and no, as if we're nodding, and then back and forth. Forward and backward for yes, and then back and forth for no, as if we're shaking our head. So I don't think Susan has ever let me down in this house. So, and every time we say, is there a spirit here? Is there anyone willing to talk to us? And every time I say, is this the spirit of Susan Redmond? I always get a very strong forward and backward swing. I think of her as almost a comforting presence. So I'm rather fond of Susan.
While some people describe the Redmond house as comforting, others aren't so sure. One young employee once swore she didn't believe in ghosts until she changed her mind when she heard footsteps rushing upstairs when no one else was in the building. After that incident, she said, "I think I believe now." We now continue our tour and head to a modest 1.5-story home next door, known as the Collins House. It was built around 1850 and donated by Elmer Collins, a descendant of one of Pickering's earliest farming families. The house is unique because of its vertical plank construction, which gives it a look unlike any other. And once you're there, it's what's inside that draws attention.
Just next to the Redmond house is the Collins house, and we've always suspected that there is the energy of a child or children in that house. One of my favorite stories of the Collins house is that we had to do guided tours and field trip programs for schools. And so there was a museum interpreter who was leading a class around, and it wasn't part of their plan to go into the Collins house. She said, well, we're not going in there, we don't have time, or we're going to a different building, or whatever it was. And the kids really wanted to go in. And they said, well, that's not fair that we can't go in because those kids get to be in there. And they're pointing up at the upstairs window of the Collins house. And they say, well, why do those kids get to go inside and get to go upstairs? Obviously, there was not a class in there, and the interpreter didn't see what these kids were seeing, but definitely they were pointing at someone, and they were adamant that there were other kids in that building.
I don't think 10-year-olds tend to imagine children in 19th century clothing waving from upstairs windows, but these kids saw something or someone in the window. Ali said the two mediums later brought in a voice box, which is a radio device that scans white noise to try to make contact. At first, nothing happened. Then there was a faint response.
I had just been talking about that, and right when I finished talking about the different diseases and how children were susceptible to them, the ghost box came through and said, "The boy is sick."
The Collins house is one of the most active sites, as visitors and staff have reported lights flickering, as well as the sound of a ball bouncing down the stairs, or see the curtains gently swinging when there's no breeze. We continue our tour and head to the far end of the museum grounds, where we'll find the Miller Coal House. Built in 1840 by Lutton Miller, it was later owned by Amos Cole, which is how the building got its name. Inside, visitors and staff have felt a warm presence during the daytime as the sun spills across the floors.
Multiple people have reported hearing a man's voice and sensing the presence of a man, and they almost always point to or reference the same corner in one of the small parlor room. Our current supervisor, before she was in the supervisor role years ago, she could hear a man talking to her, and she was looking for him, and she was responding to him, and then went into that area, and there was no one there. And it's always in that little hallway and that one corner that people tend to feel something associated with them.
But whatever the energy is, it shifts once it's dark. Ali said that one night during a ghost walk rehearsal, 2 of her most experienced ghost guides experienced something truly unexpected.
One of my most reliable tour guides, she's never spooked, and she's done this tour for years now. She and the woman standing next to her all of a sudden jumped, screamed, and my one just took off out of the house. And I'm like, okay, what just happened? And they looked back and they said, something just growled at us. And I said, what do you mean, like an animal? And they said, no, like it sounded human, but it growled, and they both heard it. And I was like, okay, well, that's new. I've never heard that before, until maybe 2 months later when I was doing the paranormal investigation with the mediums. And as one of the mediums walked up that same ramp towards the parlor, she jumped and went, oh my God, something just growled at me.
With all the paranormal activity and ghost sightings at the village, even Ali admitted she didn't try to dig too deeply into that one.
If there is any sort of angry spirit or non-human entity, I'm not sure how much I want to, again, pull at that thread.
The Pickering Museum Village along Duffins Creek is a place that is rooted in history, connecting visitors to the heritage of the area and the people who settle the land. Yet, the history here doesn't feel distant. It lingers, it breathes, and at night, when the air is still and the lanterns burn low, those who once built the community seem to ensure it's never forgotten. Thank you for joining me as we explored Pickering Village Museum, and a special thanks to Ali Crone, Heritage Programmer, for taking the time to talk with me. I really do appreciate it. If you want to check out Pickering Village Museum, I will link their website in the show notes. Do you have your own ghost story, paranormal encounter, or true crime? If yes, email it to me so I can cover it and share it with the listeners on this podcast. You can email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link the website in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Corey Price. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow, share, and tell a friend about this podcast. We would also appreciate a like and a 5-star written review. If you have Spotify, tap follow. It helps more people find these Canadian ghost stories. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, including TikTok and my YouTube channel, Haunted Canada. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.